I'm Anna. This is Pilates. So we're going to do this class without needing any props. If you want to throw in a foam roller for a little extra support for some of the standing work, and we can also integrate it into some of the arm work on the mat, but no worries if you don't have one, you could swap it for some yoga blocks, or if you have a wall or a chair for some standing support. Just remembering you can take a modification even if I don't throw it out if you know that you prefer it. So if you're working through anything, feel free to take that version. Try to give you some options to level up and level down. We're just thinking about using our breath, and we don't want to push past anything into pain. So just kind of keep an eye on what is work and what starts to become kind of uncomfortable. We want to have a good movement experience. So I think with that, we'll get started with a little standing warm up. So we'll start standing, you guys. And let's just start with a little mobilization. So we'll just stand and take a little rotation. So you can just let your ankles and knees and hips and waist and ribs, shoulders twist here. And as you're moving, right, we're looking for, rotation's great because it's kind of the fastest way to warm up our joints. We're just kind of taking a peek, so not necessarily judging or trying to change anything just yet, just kind of noticing how our body is moving. If there's any stiff places, like can you turn your head while you twist? You notice you get a little bit more rotation. How's the breath in the body? Try one more each way. Nice, and we'll come to center here. We'll do some wrist circles since we will do some stuff on hands and knees today. And so I like to start standing because, you know, the reason we do Pilates usually is to kind of sort of rebalance any imbalances that we might have, right? And that kind of comes back to our posture. Reverse this here with your wrist circles. And so incorporating sort of what do all these exercises do? And then let's take some shoulder rolls. So we'll roll up and back. So we're gonna do a couple little standing exercises that kind of give us some info on our standing posture. And then let's reverse these shoulder rolls. I'm just checking in with the breath here, trying to access a nice three-dimensional breath through the sides and the back of the rib cage. And we'll take our hands, we'll do a little protraction flexion stretch. So you can clasp your hands. We'll press away and round the upper back. You can bend the legs if you want, but we're looking to try to reach the wrists and the shoulder blades away from one another. Come into center, and then without letting the weight kind of sink into the heels, lift the sternum towards where the wall and the ceiling meet and pull the elbows back. So now we're getting a little retraction and extension. And we'll do that again, just clasp the other way. So rounding the spine, so here's that flexion, my shoulder blades are spreading away from my spine, coming into a nice neutral position, and then here's extension. So I'm pulling my shoulder blades towards my spine as I lift my chest. And let's do that one more time. Rounding the spine. Yeah, if you wanna add a little side twist. This is just your mobilization. So again, we're not judging this movement too much. We're just kind of exploring and seeing where our body is at today. Nice, now let's take a couple roll downs. The wider your feet, the more supportive, closer together, a little bit more challenging. Let's go for just 5. So you're gonna nod your chin, rotate the crown of your head to point to the ground, and then roll down. You'll kind of follow your legs with your eyes. Take a nice breath in at the bottom, whether your legs are bent or straight, and then push through the feet, scoop the abs, and come back up to standing. And let's sweep the arms overhead so we can create some space between our ribs and our hips. Right, gravity is kind of always working against us in that it's kind of compressing us together. As you roll down, something that we'll kind of notice with some of these standing exercises, where's the weight in the feet? So if the weight tends to sink into the heels and the knees tend to lock, see if you can shift it forward. So you have a little bit more weight towards the ball mound and the center of the foot. Easy breath in, right? We're creating space to breathe in too, so it's kind of this twofold. We want to mobilize and create length, but we can also create length with our breath. Create a little bit more space in our torso with our breath. Pushing through, legs should feel pretty active here, core is zipping up. If you imagine a big zipper in a jumpsuit, kind of from our pubic bone to our sternum. Let's just do one more like this. Rolling it down, right? We'll do this roll down in a different plane. It'll feel a little bit different, a little more core active, but see if you can find your core here. Pushing through the feet, scooping the abs. And then sweeping the arms up. Nice, okay, so here's where if you need your roller or your chair or something to balance with, you can use this guy to assist. You also don't need to use anything. So we're gonna play with a march. So Postural stack, right? What we tend to do is joint stack because it's easy. So whatever my joint stack might be, maybe heels, locking my knees, sitting in my low back, there's a couple variations. So what we want to find is if we bend our legs a little bit, see if we can find our weight pretty even from front to back, and then just shift your weight from right to left. So I'm kind of letting my ankles roll here. If you think about the sole of your foot, there goes the roller. I'm gonna shift from the inside and the outside of one foot to the opposite. It's kind of like a little skateboard. And then see if on this next one, you can place the entire sole of your foot down. So you're kind of spreading it from one side, just nice like you're spreading peanut butter on toast. Feel how spread out that feels, really even from front to back and right to left. And then just push to stand and see if you can keep that surface area really even. So that's like the center of our joint versus kind of locking out into one side. Bend and try that again a couple times. So a little shift from side to side. And it's more than just our feet, but it definitely can start from our feet, which we don't get a lot of attention with for a lot of our mat Pilates work, but it's pretty big in our equipment work. Try the other side this time. So you'll shift to the opposite side, see if you can place one, basically, ray down at a time. Find that even weight from right to left, front to back, so you can keep that surface area, and then push to stand. So it definitely starts here. We want to have really even foot to weight here. And then when you're ready, whether you want your roller for a little support or not, you're going to push to lift a leg up. And see if you can keep that, and we'll alternate sides. Can you keep the weight even as you change weight? So does suddenly my weight kind of shift to my heel or the outside edge of my foot? So that means there's some change in my upper body that's causing me to shift. So maybe I kind of lean back, maybe my ribs have fallen behind me, maybe my hip kind of drops out to the side. So your goal is, can I keep my weight through my foot really even? And maybe you go no hands, right? This would be the more challenging version. And it should feel really active through your leg. So it's inner thigh, outer hip, right? These two work together to stabilize our thigh in the center of our hip socket. But it's also the front and back of our hip too. So if we kind of notice we're shifting, maybe we've got a little kind of difference between our core and glute and hamstring, because those are responsible for stabilizing our pelvis and center. So give that a couple more here. If you want to make this harder, you can add a twist. So you can twist, and you can use your eyes too. Twist towards that leg. Can you still keep the weight centered through the foot? And it's like surprising how much harder the twist is to stabilize. It's definitely ankle. If you're on a squishy mat, it's going to be a little trickier. So if you need to come off and find a solid surface, especially if you've got any kind of ankle stuff going on. But see if through the whole journey of lifting the leg and lowering, can you keep the surface area even through the whole foot? And it requires quite a bit of activation through your supporting hip. And then this idea of joint stacking again from the top. So if my ribs are behind me, it's kind of already sort of throwing me off. So if you can bring your ribs forward, keep them stacked, your foot doesn't have to do quite as much work. And we'll notice this with like toes gripping. If your toes are kind of trying to paw you forward, a good solution is just to bring your rib cage forward. See if that helps. So you've got this nice like building block stack. Does this kind of make sense? It's like kind of fun and weirdly challenging. So now we'll take it to, so that's our lift to the front, right? So lifting to the side and the back is going to be a little bit different. So here you can use your roller again. We're going to do a little reach out to the side. So I'm going to do like a little toe point, it's tendu in dance, and I'm going to bring that foot back in, and I can drag my foot on the ground, kind of push into the ground. So as I'm doing this, can I keep, again, the surface area really even through my foot? And we'll do a couple different things usually here, like we might start to move with the foot. So can you keep your pelvis stacked? So to make this harder, you're going to float that leg up. So I can still brush in and out. And abduction is kind of the hardest plane. We don't have a lot when we're in parallel. Kind of what are our cheats here? So are we maybe like throwing our shoulder to balance our leg out? That is like a pretty common one. The other one is just hiking. So I'm kind of like pulling my hip up. It actually kind of takes me out of my bum. So can you keep your hips level? Here's that same push. Feels really different in this plane, right? If you try turning your foot out, you might notice it's a little easier. For some of us, that external rotation just feels a little more natural. That's why in dance, for instance, when you get really high legs, you have to rotate into external rotation to be able to get your leg up pretty high, because we run out of space pretty fast here. Try a couple on the other side. And so always you can use the support. So here's your wall. chair. So maybe start with just the brush and kind of notice, what is the body trying to do so that it doesn't have to actively stabilize. So our bodies are pretty smart, so they're always kind of like, what can I do to make this less work? And that's where joint stack comes into play. So if you like to lock your knees, if you like to sit in your heels, if you notice you kind of like to hang out in the front of your hips, right? These are all good strategies to not have to use the muscles to support us. And you'll notice the challenges are a little different. So now we're working in this plane where we're gonna feel a lot more outer hip, inner thigh probably as we move out to the side. So just a couple more like this. And then shake it out. Do you guys feel it's like a little different work from front to back, right? And our trunk does have to move too. If you think of the load of the leg changing sides. So for the last one, we'll do back. So you're gonna break into a little baby chair pose, like a mini squat. The biggest thing is if you have your hands at the front of your hip crease, right, I wanna break here first. If we just bend our knees, we're gonna put a lot of strain on the front of the knees here. So I got my roller, I can use it, maybe whichever hand is better. I'm gonna reach one leg back. So I'm already having to stabilize here through my inner thigh and outer hip, and I'm gonna do a little lift, right? And maybe I can let go. That would be like, right, our big goal. So you'll notice now, since I'm lifting my load from the back, I have to adjust my torso a lot further forward than I did for the other ones. And I think for all of these, but especially for the back and the front, you really can feel the more you push through your supporting leg, the easier it is to float your leg back. Yeah, if we have a tendency to be in a tucked pelvis, which is kind of that curled under position, it's gonna be really hard unless I bend my leg. So if you find you have to bend your leg a lot, tip your whole pelvis so that your tailbone's kind of reaching towards your back heel. And you'll be slightly on a diagonal, and that's okay. It's gonna give us a little better access to our glutes. Try the other side. So again, little baby bend, knees still tracking over toes. And so when we come down to the mat, which we will in just a moment, we're gonna think about all these leg lifts. So whenever we're on our back lifting our legs, it's like lifting our legs forward. When we're side lying, it's like our side leg lifts. And whenever we're prone, which is face down, this is kind of our back position. So we don't get as much necessarily through the foot in our Pilates mat, but it's good to kind of think about how does this translate to real life? These are all practical kind of positions. So you can take a little rest here. Set your roller off to the side. Let's do a roll down and we'll just come to hands and knees. So if you need a padding, if you want to fold your mat, we'll find our way down here. So just to start, let's just mobilize the spine a little bit. So we're gonna round the spine, finding our cat-cow. So here's your ab scoop, pushing out of the ground, and then extending and lengthening the chest forward. And we'll do that for about 3 more rounds. Moving with your breath. Did you notice when you balanced that you wanted to hold your breath? That's like a very common occurrence, and it actually makes it a little bit harder. So something to notice, can we have smooth breath? We don't necessarily have to have like fitness breath when we're moving, but can we just keep the breath fluid? And so here we are. The first thing we're gonna do is our bird dog. So whether you wanna add the arm or just start with the legs, here's that leg lift. And if you're feeling groovy and you wanna add a little extra challenge to the obliques, so a good thing to imagine as you're moving in these planes, and you keep going alternating here, is if your back body is one color and your front body is another color, when you're moving forward, you're probably using more of the front color. When you're moving backwards, I'm using more of the back color. So I wouldn't kind of grip through the front of my hip to extend my leg back. I want to free it, open it, and lengthen it so that my glutes and hamstrings can really work. And let's try one more each way. Yeah, nice. Cross your ankles here. Roll onto your bum. So now we'll kind of do the opposite. So now we're going to do a leg lift. So we'll roll back just off our sits bones here. Now I get to use my hamstring and my bicep against each other. So I've got a little support. Deep core here. I'm going to try to keep that C curve. Can I float a leg up? And as we're doing this, it's really easy to pop in the low back and kind of get into a flat back position. So keep your lift as small as you need to try to keep that C curve. Easy also for the neck to do a little bit of business, so just make sure it's nice and relaxed. So now here's our march. So this is deep core, deep hip. It's always a little harder when we take away some of the space. Standing's gonna be a little easier. Try one more each way. Nice, and then you can roll all the way down. Pulling your heels into your bum here. You can keep the arms by the hips or you can float the arms to the ceiling. Let's do a little scoop. So just like your cat-cow, we're gonna scoop to lift the hips. Nice breath in. And exhale to lengthen and lower the spine back down. So take a couple of these shoulder bridge. Let's emphasize the core work. So rather than smashing the back to lift the hips, we're gonna think of scooping the abs and then just noticing that the weight shifts into the upper back and the feet and lengthening and lowering back down. And shoulder bridge is kind of nice because we can get a little bit more foot information here. So we wanna have the knees reaching over the toes. We've got this nice stack of hip, knee, and foot. The glutes will just turn on, so you don't necessarily have to think of squeezing them. Kind of let them naturally engage. And then of course, all the other good shoulder bridge stuff. So we're thinking even length through both sides of the torso. Try not to let the hips rotate. So if you had two headlights on your hip bones, they're facing the same direction. We're gonna take one more, we're gonna stay up at the top. So my kind of beginning version is just to stabilize through my left glute and lift my right heel. And then I'll lower my right heel, stabilize through my right glute, lift my left heel. If this is feeling too easy, you can come into marches. So now a march is kind of a nice combined variation. So I'm getting extension and flexion at the same time on opposite legs as I alternate these marches. And this is kind of the work that you want to feel whenever you're supporting your leg standing. It should feel like your supporting leg is having to work almost more than the lifting leg. Or another way to think about it is it's the impetus. So my supporting leg is so strong, it's actually lifting my lifting leg for me in a sense. And just checking in with the breath, checking in with the ribs. Let's try one more each side, so we'll even ourselves out here. And then find your best position here at the top, make any little adjustments you need. Sweep your arms overhead, and then lengthen and lower all the way back down. You can reach your arms to a T, walk your feet a little bit wider than your hips, and let your knees fall from side to side. And think about your pelvis leading this motion. So your hips are gonna pull the knees to the ceiling and let them fall to the side. Nice wide breath into the back here. And then on the next couple of these, think about your knees leading. So my top thigh opens up, and then it pulls my second leg, and the hips are gonna follow. So we're essentially changing the intention. Here's that top hip, it's almost like a clamshell. And then my knees float up, try that one more time each way. So we're seeing what is our maximum movement of the thigh and the hip joint before the pelvis rotates. And on the last one, roll all the way over to your side. So whichever side you wanna lie on, just make sure you can kind of see as you need. And now we'll do abduction. So whatever's most comfortable for your head, you can always put something under it. You can do a little bent elbow, long arm. Activate through that bottom leg so it's super straight. So you've got inner thigh, flexed foot, my bum is on. Top leg's just gonna float up in parallel and lower back down. If you imagine there's a wall behind you, or if you have a wall behind you, you can scrape your heel up against that imaginary wall. And so here, now we've got our supporting leg, right? We did the standing. So we wanna make sure, since our pelvis is connected, you'll find you grip a lot more if that supporting leg is just kind of blah and relaxed, right? We do want the bottom side on. Same with the obliques. So as you're lifting and lowering, if you feel a little unstable, like the torso and the pelvis kind of want to swivel, think of lifting those bottom ribs up and in. And it's just an engagement. So it's not like you have to push away from the mat, but find a little bit of a lift through that bottom side. Nice. Yeah, and in parallel, you'll notice there's a pretty natural stopping point where it doesn't come super, super high. If you notice your legs getting really high, check and make sure you're not in turnout or you're not crunching through that torso, because sometimes our torso likes to do a little bit of lifting here. Pause on this next one. We'll go about hip height. So not super high, still parallel, so you can give it a little check. You're gonna crease at the front of the hip and bring the leg forward. And then exhale, use the bum to bring the leg back. So certainly harder. Notice kind of what jumps in and wants to brace. So if your neck is like, oh, I'll hold you here, maybe keep your range a little smaller, maybe put a hand down for a little support. See if you can find your core. Lengthen your tailbone long. Use your glute and hamstrings to pull your leg back. Supporting leg is still playing with us here. And we'll try one more each way. How's the breath? So as soon as it got balanced, did the breath kind of leave? And then let's make it a little harder. Float at hip height. We're gonna make some circles. And here's where length is always your friend. So the more you can reach that leg away as you're engaging through that supporting leg, and then a little bit of oblique, and reverse your circles. Nice. So this is really tough. It's isometric. So we've been holding this leg kind of in space for a while now. Outer hip, inner thigh, we're getting full hip circumduction. So you're kind of working everything, which is pretty cool. And then take a rest. Nice. Before we go to the other side, let's do a little ab intermission. So we'll come onto our backs here. Come into your imprint. So flat back position, right? So I've got my hip bones drawing towards one another, a little bit of pelvic floor. I'm gonna draw my ribs and hips together to rotate my pubic bone towards my chest. So here's my flat back position. It's active versus like a smash. I'm gonna float one leg to tabletop. Just a little test. Did my ribs pop? Did my abs pop? Did my back pop? If nothing popped, I'm good to go. I can keep alternating here. If I wanna make it harder, I can float both legs to tabletop, and then I can take my toe taps here. So I'm just adding load. So if I want more support, I'm gonna keep one of those legs down and do a leg lift. The hardest part is every time that thigh is reaching away from center, right? It's gonna try to pull you into a little bit of extension. And so this is what supports us, and kind of in opposition to our glutes and hamstrings, is the abdominals. That's gonna hold your pelvis centered, kind of the strength between those 2 points. If you wanna make this harder, you can start to tap a little further away. You could always float the arms to the ceiling if you notice that you really like to clench, or if you find it's hard to breathe. Maybe try floating the arms up. See if it kind of gives you a little bit more space. You can get a little bit locky in the lats and in the neck here. And we'll take about 4 more like this. When you finish your last one, you can either keep your legs in tabletop or you can lower them back down to the ground. Clasp your hands behind your head. Take a nice breath in. We're gonna exhale to curl up. And inhale to lengthen. Yeah, so as you exhale, really nodding that chin before you lift your head from the mat to support the neck, because we do want the mid-back to protect it. These floating ribs, this is where it's happening. So as I exhale, remember that you're coming from your thoracic versus your chin, kind of doing the lift here. And a fun little secret kind of ab strength builder is to lift in 1 count and then lower in 2. So if you float up in 1, as you exhale, see if you can lengthen and keep the core on. So you're just turning the dial up. You're keeping the temperature on, but you're just turning the dial back down a little bit with some control. Nice. For the last couple, if you want to make this a little harder, you're going to do a nice little toe tap each time you come up, alternating sides. We'll just go for about 8 of those. Right, and so this is just challenging that imprint on both ends now. So we're challenging the low core here. We're challenging the upper ribs there. Yeah, nice. Easy neck, right? My mid back is supporting me here. You can take a little peek and notice if the hips have gone askew. You've got 1 more each way. Good, yeah, nice. Last one here. And then you can carefully pull those legs into your chest, take a couple circles, We'll roll to the other side for that side leg work. I'm gonna do a full spin just so you guys can see me, but feel free to roll over since you kind of know what the sequence is. So our setup, so bottom leg's really active, flexed foot, inner thighs engaged. Know that you're asymmetrical, so if you need a different setup for your head on this side, feel free to switch it up. So I've got my little check, shoulders, ribs, hips. Here's that bottom oblique, it's active. I'm gonna float that top leg up and down. Yeah, and if there was a wall behind you, you can think about like scraping your heel up and down that imaginary wall. And similar to when we do our toe tap test, right, we're kind of going, okay, what's popping? We want to make sure we're not popping. So your test here would be, is my foot going so high that I'm smashing this side of my body down? So I can't go quite as high. Remember when you did it standing in parallel, we don't actually have a ton of abduction, which is why we would go into rotation. Or if you feel like your back is kind of clenching here to do any lifting, that would be another little good check. Right, if my neck is clenching, maybe find a little bit more core, find a little more length, find more breath. And this next one will pause hip height. So here's that nice isometric low torture. You're gonna reach that leg forward. It's a tongue twister, apparently. And reach that leg back. So here's that nice crease. And then here's your glute and hamstring as you extend. And if it feels like the body's kind of corkscrewing a little bit, find more energy through that bottom leg. So can you keep the hips kind of countering the movement? And you could always reach that arm up if you want to make it harder. If you need a little more support, you could always bring the arm down. Just kind of check in with any like armpit clenching, any jaw clenching. And this next one, we'll make some circles. And just about the size of like a basketball. Getting some nice movement. Front to back, yeah. Lovely. Try one more this direction, then we'll reverse it here. And opposite way. Yeah, here's where that breath comes into play. So just make sure you can have a nice, smooth, easy breath. Breath is kind of your guide to unnecessary tension. Try 3, and 2, and 1. And take a little rest. Nice work. We feel some bum. It's a little more tired usually the second side. So now we'll do a little extension. So we'll do a little upper back just to get some movement in because that's nice. Little shoulder blade engagement. So I've got my hands, don't feel like you have to be squished in by the mat, but about shoulder rib height. We're gonna roll the shoulder blades up and back. So you're thinking retraction just like in the warm up. I'm pressing down through the tops of my feet to get my glutes and hammies on. My core is engaged. I'm gonna lift with my ribs first, and then I lower with my ribs. So it's shoulder blades that lift, ribs, sternum, gaze, and then roll back down the same way. If you wanna make this harder, you can just take away the support by floating the hands. That's loading your upper back, right? This is upper back work. So if you feel this in your upper back, that's correct. If it feels really awful and unsupported and like, I call it ginchy in the low back, I'm not sure that that's really a word, but then bring your support back. So you're gonna take off load to protect your low back. Find more activation through your glutes and your abs. And this idea of a back arch isn't necessarily like lifting really high, but it's actually lengthening the spine long. So the more you can think of if you were a fish and you just got hooked and caught and you're getting pulled, it's this nice length, reaching the sternum through. And on this next one, you can rest your head on your forehead on your hands, bend your knees and just do a little swipe here. Because now we'll do some leg extension. Yeah, take out your props too. At least it's light. It's a good prop to take out. So you can rest your head the whole time. I'm gonna kind of bop my head up so I can yak at you guys. But you'll have your core activated. Same thing. So when you press through the tops of your feet, it will kind of lift the knees. You want your glutes and hammies engaged at the top. And then all we'll do, keeping both sides engaged, right? Your pelvis is connected. So I push through the right, I lift the left, and vice versa. I push through the left, I lift the right. So a lot of our extension is actually dictated by the strength in our extension in our hips, so glutes and hamstring. So if you're working on back bends, you have to have really strong glutes and hamstrings. And it's, I think, not always advertised. And you'll notice, and you can even take one to test, like do one where the supporting glute is really lazy. You notice how you kind of sink into the hip and you maybe get a little bit less height. You'll feel kind of the hip bone die forward. And then try a couple with that supporting leg really active. And then let's make this a little more exciting. We're gonna float both up at the same time. Now, if this doesn't feel good in the low back, then don't go back to your alternating sides. Glutes and hammies, if the knees wanna bend, we wanna see if we can bring it back to that top of the hamstring. And we'll just try 3 more like this. Last 2. Last 1. Nice, so you can bring your hands by your side, use your abs, press back, take a child's pose. So knees wide can be nice for hips, knees together can be nice for low back. Take about 3 breaths here and see if you can think about if there was like a fire right below your belly button. You're gonna scoop your core in away from that fire and push with your arms to hollow out your middle. So pretty active here through that low back. Nice, you can start to walk yourself back up. Nice, okay, round 2. So bird dog, side to side. So for this guy, we'll set up, and again, you can opt for just a leg or arm and leg. And we'll take about 6 on each side. If this is really, really tight in the hip, just bias a little bit more on the diagonal so that you're, sorry, that's more diagonal versus perfectly side, if that kind of knocks you off. But we'll go for 6 one side. As you're pressing the supporting hip, so we come back to that supporting side, you want to push your supporting hip up so it's almost the impetus of floating that leg up. Yeah. Love an exhale to coordinate the core, pushing out of that arm. Nice, when you finish that 6, you can come back in, try the other side. If you're keeping your hands down, notice if the elbows want to bend and see if you can really push out of all 3 limbs. So supporting hip and those arms. And it is a little bit more weight on the shoulder. So you could do this on the forearms if the wrist doesn't feel good here. Halfway. Yeah, exhaling. And last one. Nice. Cross your ankles. Come back onto your bum. This is the one if you want to add your foam roller or your block. You could do it here. I'm going to switch sides here. Face you guys for a minute. So legs bent. We're going to do a little half roll back. If you don't have a roller, you can just reach your arms forward here. So I'm starting as tall as I can seated. I might have to adjust my feet out a little bit. You could always go straight legs if the hip flexors really don't like this. We're going to roll down just off our sits bones. Take a nice breath in, and then exhale to curl forward. And so I'm looking for, as I roll back, low core, and then I'm gonna find, here's my crunch, to curl me back up. And the roller's just giving me a little bit of feedback into my shoulder blades. I'm taking my roller with me. Love an exhale for the effort part here. Inhaling and exhaling to curl up. If you wanna make this a little more exciting, on this next one, you'll float the arms up, and then you'll reach forward. So I'm just adding a little more load. So I'll exhale to reach back, take a nice breath in, and then exhale to reach forward. Adding a little breath in there. Exhaling. Inhale, can I keep this position in my spine? And maybe I don't go quite as far back. So if I notice that I lift and I pop, or I lift and I pop my head forward, I'm gonna maybe keep the roller a little bit lower, right? Not quite as high. If I can't support it, then maybe I won't roll down quite as high. Try one more like this. Hopefully you're feeling some core, definitely some deep hip, and then exhaling. Nice, and the next one we're gonna add a little rotation. If you don't have the roller, it's okay. You're gonna exhale to roll back, take a breath in. We'll exhale to twist to the right. Nice breath in through center, and exhale to twist to the left. So as you're twisting, inhaling through center and exhaling to twist, can you keep your pelvis steady and your knees from shifting? So maybe those knees come together. You should feel pretty equally weighted from right to left side. And then it's just at my waist. So you can think of like a dish rag. You're wringing out the dish rag as you twist. Let's do one more each way. Nice, watch those elbows if you like to hyperextend. Lovely, and you can roll all the way down. Nice, so if you want to do your full roll up, you can use the roller. This can be a nice fun variation. I'm gonna reach my arms overhead, sweep the arms to the ceiling, take a breath in as I exhale. I'm gonna curl all the way up. If you wanna go for that nice hamstring stretch, you can. And then you'll roll all the way down. So starting with that half roll back piece. Lovely. Nice, yeah, and if you don't want the roller, obviously you can ditch it. Bent legs can be nice if you're working on your roller. Let's go for roll up. Let's go for 6 full roll ups. I'm gonna yak at you for a moment. So we'll sweep the arms up to the ceiling and grab onto the legs. If you're working on your roll up, or if you ever wanna grab a band or a strap, that can also be a nice variation to give you a little extra feedback. Nice. I'm gonna do 2 more with you guys with the roller. So just like my arms coming forward, just got a little extra load. If you ever wanna make this a little more exciting, you could always exchange the roller for some weights. And then on this next one, we'll come all the way down. We'll ditch that roller for a moment. We'll come into a little more ab work. So we're gonna play with your bird dog on your back. So we're gonna come into our imprint position, drawing hip bones towards one another, hips and ribs come together. I'm gonna float one leg to tabletop and my second leg to tabletop. So I can isolate this and just work an arm or a leg, or I can do the full exercise, which is both arms and legs moving. So I've got my arms facing, palms facing each other, arms to the ceiling. I'm gonna sweep my right arm overhead as I tap my left toe. And then I come back up and I switch sides. So we're still trying to keep that imprint position. So if ribs pop, back pop, abs pop, then we're gonna either change the range of motion, so just bring it in a little bit, or maybe start with just the arms, just the legs. We can break it down. If we wanna make it harder, we can start to kick that opposite leg to a hover. So a little bit more deep hip. You can find your glute. Flexing the foot can be a nice variation if you're not always sure if it's engaged versus a point, which can get a little bit more quad heavy. And we'll take about 4 more like this. Exhaling to reach. Let's do 1 more each way. Working those train track lines. We've got hip, knee, and ankle. And then keeping that imprint, you can reach those legs. So a slight bend is fine if the legs don't go fully straight. We're gonna try to reach our legs straight to the ceiling, arms up. Now we're gonna do a little bit of out and in. So just like we did a moment ago, my right leg is gonna reach out to the side as my left arm reaches out to the side. And then I come back in, everything squeezes to center. My left leg reaches out as my right arm reaches out. And then everything squeezes together. And I'll show from this view too, just for everybody out there. And can you keep, and you'll notice a lot of times that your opposite leg is gonna try to accommodate a little bit by maybe also going out to the side. Think about drawing your opposite rib and your hip together as you alternate. Nice, you guys try 1 more each way. Kind of a weird one, huh? It's a lot of hip. So the more you can engage, and you guys can take a little break, we'll take a twist here. So if you wanna bend your legs, let your legs fall over to the right, and then let that left arm sweep in opposition. So when you're in that side series, as you breathe in your twist, the more you can engage your hips. So just like you did inner thigh, outer hip, you should almost feel like it's a clamshell. In a sense, it's a really similar feeling. And maybe even having hands and playing with that. Let's take your twist the other way. So we'll go legs to the left, sweeping the arm to the right. And that's true of a lot of our ab work. If we can get our hips to engage a little bit more in terms of getting the outer hip on, We'll find that the ab work becomes a lot easier because we have our bum helping us too. And then let's come back onto our backs here for a little more core work. We love the abs here. So we'll start with a twist. So for this twist, our first variation is keeping our toes on the ground. This is going to be a little more supportive with the arms out. When I twist, I'm still lifting my top hip. And then I can exhale, come back to center, squeeze my inner thighs, and then come to the other side. This is, easy. You're feeling pretty good about it. Come into your imprint and float your legs to tabletop. So same thing, twisting here. I'm going to let my top hip lift. My bottom inner thigh, my abs, and my outer hip are all responsible for bringing me back up to center. Only going to go as far as I feel like I can keep that opposite shoulder down, but also that I'm not wrenching through my low back. So if you feel like your neck is really tight, I would say maybe find a little more core support and maybe keep the range a little smaller. If your knees shift, it's a really good sign your pelvis is shifting. So see if you can keep those knees really stacked when you go to the side. And we'll try one more like this. And then if you want to make it a little more exciting, clasp your hands, bring your head and shoulders off the mat, and then keep your crunch. So we're going to try 6 in our crunch position. You can always go back to just your head down and arms in a T. Can you keep your knees together? Can you keep the hip lifting? And then can you keep from kind of leaning to one elbow or the other? So it's going to be a little smaller range. This one's kind of fun. It might feel like you barn door off to the side. So it's a good little oblique challenge. And then on the next one, and even if your head is down, you're going to extend that bottom leg out on the diagonal, come back in, twist to the other side. So you could do this with your head up or your head down. We're extending the bottom leg out on the diagonal here. If you're up, you're trying to keep, again, the shoulder blades and adjust off the tips here. We're going to take one more each way. Easy breath. And then you can roll all the way onto your back here. Okay, fun little variation. We're going to take our hands behind our right leg. And either my left foot's going to stay down, so this is kind of version 1, and I might need to adjust the length of it depending kind of for me, or I could float the leg up to tabletop. So this is going to be a single leg kick and lift. So I'm going to push through my hamstring, and I'm going to come up. And so this leg could be long, this leg could be bent, right? I have a couple options. And you can use some momentum, which is kind of nice too. So it's a little bit of like rolling like a ball in that sense. If I want to make this harder, I can float my left leg up and then try to keep it up. And just give that a couple tries. And it's pushing into, so I'm really using my arms. I'm trying to get my glute and hamstrings to work here. And once you've given that maybe like 4 tries on this side, and it's quite a bit of core, then you can come in, exchange legs. So, right, you've got a couple options. You can have the leg down. You can also have the leg floating, right? Maybe use a little bit of momentum just to get a sense of, we've got some asymmetries here. And then give this about 4 tries. So lots of deep psoas. Some hamstring, right? If you want to make this harder, of course, which I didn't give the option, but you could also not use your hands. So if you really want to work those hip flexors. And then once you've done about 4 on this side, we'll come all the way back down. Come back to your first side, lengthen that opposite leg long, clasp your hands behind your thigh, and take a couple knee pumps. So you're just going to kick your heel to the ceiling. And just drawing that thigh in. Take a nice little stretch here. On this last one, if you want to pause, you can point your foot, flex, maybe take some ankle rolls, get a little movement, crunch the toes. We'll take some leg circles here. So for your leg circles, a bent supporting leg is going to be a little more supportive versus long. If you've got the leg long, flex your foot and really kick your bum on. This leg can be bent, right, tabletop, or straight. So go with whatever's going to give you a better pelvic position. If you find it's hard to do a straight leg without tucking, I would bend that knee. Arms can come out to the side or come up to the ceiling. And we're going to make some circles. So we're going to cross midline, exhale to sweep out and around, and then draw the leg back to center. So to make this more supportive, right, more surface area on the ground is usually a good strategy. And keeping your range of motion a little bit smaller. If you want to make this harder, make those circles pretty big. Play with some speed. Maybe keep the arms up the whole time. The more you can kind of work your hips here. Let's do one more this way. And then we'll reverse. So now I'm going to take a nice breath in. Exhale as I sweep that leg out and around, cross my midline and come back up to center. So the more I can use my hips, so again, here's that outer hip, inner thigh, bum, deep hip, the less my abs have to do here. And they're definitely still working a ton. So my hips can take a little bit more of the load. One more like this. And then you can bend that leg, let that leg cross all the way over. Sweep that arm up, take a nice little twist here. If this is too much in the lower back, just bend that bottom leg in and you can do a little stack. That can be a little more supportive if SI does not love this. And just breathing in between the ribs and the hips here. So if you had an inner tube, think about filling that inner tube with some air. A little body scan if there's any unnecessary tension in the neck and the shoulder. You exhale, maybe try a nice sigh. And then we'll just roll back onto the back here. So we'll exchange the legs. You can clasp your hands, maybe clasp the way that feels a bit odd. And try those knee pumps on this side. So I'm drawing my thigh in, just kicking that heel to the ceiling, going for a little stretch. Kind of our sciatic line, so it could be a nice stretch through the calf, the back of the knee, the hamstring, maybe even the low back. And on this last one, if you want to add a little point and a flex, maybe some ankle circles, some toe crunches, just get a little movement in there. And we'll set up for our circles on the other side. So again, a little more supportive is that bent leg. If you want to go long, just get that glute on, so really kick through the heel. Arms can be out in a T or up to the ceiling. We're going to cross our midline on the inhale and then exhale through that kind of hardest moment out to the side. And remember, you can adjust this. We're asymmetrical typically, so you might find that you need different support or less support or more support, right, on each side. If you notice that your lats, like if your arms are down and you're really squeezing your armpits, see if you can maybe even bend the elbows and just let the armpits kind of relax. We can bear down in a lot of interesting ways. And then we'll reverse this here. So we'll inhale, sweep the leg out to the side, and exhale to cross. And here again is where that supporting leg is pretty clutch. So the more I can activate the supporting leg, the more support I have in the working leg. Try two more like this. And then you can take that leg, bend it, we'll cross it over for our second twist here, sweeping that arm in opposition. If you want a little more support, you can always bend that bottom leg in. And you might find that you need different support in your twist too, so just listen to your body. Again, finding some breath in this twist, creating some space between the hip and the rib using your breath. And then on this next breath, let's roll all the way over onto our front here. We'll take a couple extensions. So for this one, we'll do two variations. So the first one, we'll just do a nice little like flying squirrel situation. So you have three options, or Superman, you have three options for your arms. You can have the arms down by the hips. You can have the arms in a cactus, so kind of like your goal T position. And I would say kind of the hardest, but also quite traditional, is arms forward. Regardless of the position, and maybe you want to mix them up, make sure your shoulder blades are set on your spine. So if your arms are down by your hips, you're gonna wrap those shoulder blades towards your spine first, and then take a nice breath in as you extend, and an exhale to lower. Yep, and that's kind of true for any of these other positions. I'm gonna set my shoulder blades, inhale, and exhale to lower. If you're reaching your arms forward, your palms will be down and your gaze will also kind of be gently towards the top of the mat versus completely in front of you. And if you want to mix it up, feel free to try a couple different ones. We'll go for maybe about 6 of these guys. That rotation in your shoulder blades is pretty important. If you're protracted, it's going to be really hard to lift, but if you can find a little retraction, yeah, nice. Good, you guys. We'll get a little bit more extension. Still your glutes and your hamstrings floating up. And if inhale doesn't work for you, if you like an exhale, you're welcome to switch it. Inhale's kind of nice just because of the natural way that our diaphragm moves. It's pretty buoyant. When you finish your 6, you can take a child's pose. You can press back here. We'll add a little side bend stretch. Whether your knees are together or apart, reach your arms over to the right and then push your hips out to the left. If you can't quite get your forehead down, you can take your back hand and you can rest your forehead on your back of your palm, or you could make a little fist. If you've got a yoga block, that can be nice. You can take some of the tension out of the head hanging without having support. And then walk those hands over to the other side here. And you can push the hips in the opposite position. So it is pretty active. So my arms are sort of like when we're in our bird dog. I am pushing, getting that nice lateral stretch. And then walking those hands to the center for one last little breath here. And we'll start to roll it back up. Nice, and let's do like a little ab burnout to finish, because that's always fun. So you can sit on your bum. We'll start with a little teaser balance. So you'll roll back just like the half roll back that we practiced. You can have your hands behind your thighs to start. We want to keep that C curve. It's a little different than our yoga boat pose. We want to keep the curl. So you might find as you float up, one leg at a time here, that you need to maybe adjust a little bit if the tendency is, because some of this is just like the length of our bones. And you can use your arms against your legs, which is nice too. Maybe you let go, right? That's always a fun variation. Should feel pretty active. So it feels like you're just kind of hanging out and sitting, seeing if you can scoop your pubic bone towards your chest actively. And then maybe you also just need to add more load. So lengthening the legs, reaching the arms up, right? There's a lot of ways to make this harder if it feels like, oh, this is really easy. Plug your shoulder blades in, check in with your neck, right? There's lots of good little details. One more breath here. Nice, yeah, still breathing. And then you can bend your legs, roll all the way down. We're gonna come into a couple little ab things. So we'll start with double leg stretch. So for double leg stretch, I'm coming into my imprint position. I'm gonna float one leg at a time into tabletop. I can do this with my head down. I can also do it with an ab prep. So I'll reach my arms to the ceiling. I'm gonna take a nice breath in as I exhale. I'm gonna curl up into my crunch and reach for my feet. So here's my head up version, right? You can always set the head down. We're gonna inhale, reach our arms and legs away from each other, still keeping my imprint, and then exhale to reach back for your feet. So this is just a nice isometric hold in the core, and it's still a ton of work, even if the head is down. But if we are in our crunch position, we're trying to keep the crunch, even when we reach the arms back. So there's a bit of range of motion here. Try one more like this. Nice, you're gonna reach your right leg to the ceiling. You can grab onto thigh or calf, left leg reaches long. We'll switch for some scissors. So same thing, you can isometrically hold for core, or you can keep the head down, right? And you can switch between. If it feels like neck is talking more than core, I would definitely opt for just letting the head rest. If you wanna float your hands, it's gonna make this just a little more exciting. We'll go for 4, and 3, and 2, and 1, clasp your hands behind your head. We're gonna go into a little oblique bicycle to finish. Now I can keep my head down, still tons of work through my low core. I can take my bicycles a little higher for more support or a little lower for a little more challenge. If I'm adding my oblique twists, I'm rotating without resting on my elbow. We'll take 4 more here. Exhaling to switch for 3, 2, 1. And then you can clasp your hands around your thighs, opposite knees here. And we'll take, or I guess same side, we'll take some little knee circles. So just guiding with your hands out and in, and then reverse it for about 3 more like that. Nice little ab finale. You can take your right leg, you can cross it all the way over your left, so it's like we're sitting cross-legged in a chair, and then either grabbing under the thighs, shins are just kind of above the ankles. You can draw the knees towards your chest and then press your tailbone down. So you're getting a nice little active stretch here. If knees don't like this position, you could always opt for a figure 4. And then let those legs, so my right leg's on top, let those legs fall to the left, and then sweep that right arm out. So we're getting a nice little twist in the other position here. Again, if it's too much, you could always uncross and just stack the legs. And then gently just returning those legs back. You can uncross and recross the opposite way, so that my left is on top and stacked. And then grabbing either backs of thighs kind of below the knee or above the ankle and the shin, and then pull those legs in towards your chest as you press your tailbone down. Easy breath here, easy shoulders. And then let those legs fall to the right. Left arm's gonna sweep up and over. And take a couple of breaths on this side, just kind of noticing the differences, similarities. If there's any areas that feel really challenging to breathe into, see if you can inhale, even just the imagery of directing your breath into that area can help provide more access to it. And then gently letting those legs come back to center here. You can take a couple easy windshield wipers, letting the knees fall from side to side. Again, kind of leading with the hips first. And then maybe for the last couple, coming back to the thigh, initiating that movement. So I'm gonna see if I can lift my top leg as far as possible, and then let my pelvis follow here. Just kind of see how are the thighs sitting in the hip sockets. And then just thinking about how you want to get up. Maybe you want to take a rock and roll. Maybe you want to roll onto your side. Maybe you want to do one really slow and controlled final roll up. Just kind of thinking of how you want to end class with some intention. And I'll leave you guys there today. Thanks for coming. So nice to see you all. Have a lovely holiday weekend. 3 days. Do you guys all get the whole weekend off? Not this weekend. For the first time in a month. We're staying here. Yeah, crowded and hot. Thanks, you guys. So you're making fun? My folks are coming to visit. Oh, cool. From Montana? Yeah.